I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight, we're going to talk about how a local parent reacted to an awful tragedy, the death of her daughter. We're going to see how she decided to take action to champion a bill in the legislature, to use her pain and sorrow to try and help others. It's our big story tonight. When election season came around last fall, we reminded you of how important it is to vote. Voting is an important way to get involved in our democratic process. We also think it's important here at The Story to show you how to get involved in things like changing laws. And yes, it can sound intimidating, but it's really actually pretty simple. So we did a report that we walked you through what you needed to know. One of the people who saw that segment was Kellee Harris, who lives in Milwaukie. She decided it wasn't that hard to get involved, and so she did. She used her heartbreaking story to try and make some positive changes. Here's producer Ashley Koch.
Chair, Senator Przanski, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Kellee Harris, and I am here as the voice of our late daughter, Kelsey Harris.
Just over 2 years ago, Kellee Harris experienced the unimaginable, the loss of a daughter.
And I think she just really loved being in a classroom environment.
Kelsey Harris was 31 years old, a teacher and coach at Lebanon High School.
She really cared about kids. She loved coaching. She loved teaching. She loved counseling.
But in March 2021, Kelsey ended up at the hospital.
On March 20th, 2021, I believe Kelsey was nearly strangled to death by her abusive boyfriend and was so traumatized she took her life a week later on March 28th. I think she was so traumatized by what happened that she just felt that no one was there for her.
Harris says that when Kelsey went to the hospital, she was diagnosed as having been strangled. But Harris says Kelsey wasn't actually given any diagnostic tests or referred for services. The charges against the person accused of strangling her were dismissed. Harris says she was told it would have been a difficult case to prosecute.
The Lynn County District Attorney's Office told me, when it comes to strangulations, juries like to see bruises. I will never forget those words. I was told even if Kelsey had lived to testify against her abuser, the jury might not have believed her since she did not have highly visible neck bruises. This is the picture they took after her strangulation.
50% of the time, there are no visible injuries after a strangulation.
Teresa Muncie is a forensic nurse examiner. She treats patients who have lived through domestic violence. She knows that strangulation injuries are often invisible on the outside. She also knows just how dangerous they are.
Every time a person is strangled, they are more and more at risk of dying just because of the way that injury can impact the brain.
According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, it's possible to show no outward symptoms of strangulation, but die weeks later due to lack of oxygen and other internal injuries. Strangulation can also cause traumatic brain injuries, with symptoms including dizziness, vomiting, seizures, miscarriage, changes in mood and sleep patterns, and many others. When it comes to treating strangulation patients, looking closely at their injuries and collecting evidence is vitally important, and that's the job of the forensic nurse examiner. One of their newest tools is a strangulation kit, or SKIT. The idea is similar to a rape kit, says Savannah Powell, another forensic nurse.
And it's usually like a swab on the neck, and that's what that is collecting is DNA from the perpetrator.
And there are ways to look closer at potential internal injuries, like with special CT scans. But those tests can be expensive. That's why Kellee testified before lawmakers in Salem, determined to do something in the wake of Kelsey's death and help other victims of domestic violence.
I first heard about testifying in the Oregon legislature on KGW The Story.
From the homepage, under the Make Your Voice Heard tab, click Testify.
So she reached out to her lawmakers and told them she was interested in bills having to do with strangulation victims.
And they said, well, coincidentally, we've got something very strong and solid, and we would love to have your support.
House Bill 2676 would provide strangulation kits free of charge to domestic violence victims.
And they said, come and testify, tell your daughter's story. And I said, okay, that's going to be really hard, but for Kelsey, I'm willing to do that.
These nurses say it would make a huge difference.
You can see on people's faces when you say, this is covered, sign this piece of paper, and this is covered, their faces just like relax. And to be able to do that for, expand that funding to strangulation is going to absolutely change our work.
That brings us to April 19th, 2023. Just over 2 years since Kelsey Harris died.
If strangulation kits had been available in Lynn County at the time of my daughter's assault, they could have made all the difference for Kelsey. I urge you to pass HB 2676.
Kellee says it's what Kelsey would have wanted her to do.
It's not just something that happens to someone else. It can happen to you. It can happen to your family. It can happen to your daughter, just like it did for us.
Ashley Koch, KGW News.
What a strong mom. Right now, strangulation kits are only being used in 11 Oregon counties. The conviction rate for strangulation, really low. Last year in Multnomah County, there were 130 felony strangulation charges, but only 13 convictions. That's according to the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. House Bill 2676 also makes other changes to what's called the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. It provides money for those things like crime scene cleanup and counseling. Right now, the bill is going through work sessions and has a long ways to go before becoming law. If you or someone you know is in a violent relationship, we want you to know that there is help available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline has a phone number. It's 800-799-7233. And the Multnomah County Crisis Line is there for you, 503-988-4888. They can help you find a safe place to stay, legal help, and also let you know what your financial options are. We mentioned conviction rates in that last segment, and we're going to continue with that theme right now with this next story. Our investigative team has done all sorts of work showcasing the shortcomings and the lack of prosecution for crimes like shoplifting and car theft in Multnomah County. Auto theft, well, that happens all the time here. Last year, listen to this, nearly 11,000 cars were stolen, ripped off in Portland. That means on average, a car is stolen every 48 minutes, 24 hours a day. But today, leaders in Multnomah County and the Rose City announced a plan to crack down on that with the creation of 2 new task forces. One's going to focus on organized retail theft. The other's going to go after car thieves. And the county and city are providing money to get things going. The ultimate goal? Justice, holding the criminals accountable. Kyla Boshi explains.
Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt, along with other local leaders and law enforcement, held a press conference to explain the plan. They're going to hire 5 people to help lead the task forces targeting car thieves and shoplifters, including 2 prosecutors, a pair of investigators, and a legal assistant. Schmidt explained these teams will focus on the worst offenders.
If you got to prioritize, we want to prioritize the people who have 3, 4, 5, 6 stolen car cases out there and make sure that at the very least they are being held accountable.
As we've been reporting, there's been a real spike in retail theft cases in the Portland area. Many retailers admit shoplifting has gotten so out of control, they don't even bother reporting it. The KGW investigation showed criminals literally stealing merchandise off store shelves and walking out the front door with little or no fear of being arrested or prosecuted. Even Multnomah County's top prosecutor admits he's witnessed it.
I mean, I myself was shopping at a local retailer, and I'm in the Lego aisle with my son, and we saw somebody scoop up a bunch of Legos and walk out. I think we've all seen it.
Previously, our reporting found the prosecution rate for misdemeanor petty theft cases in Portland, which includes shoplifting, is 46%. That means less than half of the theft 2 or theft 3 cases sent to the Multnomah County DA's office by police are charged. Most cases are dismissed. At the time, DA Schmidt explained those cases that are dismissed are often rejected because prosecutors don't have the evidence they need. The DA hopes the extra prosecutors and investigators on the task force can help with that follow-up, things like interviews, collecting evidence, or surveillance video that will help build a case and hold criminals accountable. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
Up next on the story.
I owe the people of Oregon an apology.
Oregon's Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan, gives her first public comments after it was revealed she was consulting for a troubled cannabis company whose owners were big political donors.
Taking that contract was poor judgment. I made a mistake, and I own it, and I am sorry.
And not only that, Fagan's office is in charge of state audits, and it just so happens that a cannabis industry audit was going on at the same time. How her news conference turned personal, and we'll do a deep dive comparison of the salaries of elected leaders across the country. Spoiler alert, Oregon is nowhere near the top. We'll take a look when the story returns.
I am sorry for harming the trust that I and so many others have worked so hard to build, and I will begin working to build that trust back today.
Today, Oregon Secretary of State gave her first public comment since a cannabis consulting controversy came to light last week. Shemia Fagan took a side job as a paid consultant for the owners of a troubled marijuana dispensary chain. Willamette Week reports that Fagan started working for the owners of LaMotta in February and was being paid $10,000 a month. She terminated that contract, she says, yesterday. Court records show LaMotta and associated businesses have racked up millions of dollars in unpaid taxes and have been sued repeatedly for not paying bills. At the same time, the owners made big political donations to top Democrats, including Ms. Fagan. She said she only consulted on the company's projects outside of Oregon. What makes the situation even more messy is that as Secretary of State, Fagan oversees state audits. And that included an audit on Oregon's regulation of the cannabis industry, that very industry that she was consulting for. Last week, the audit director explained that Fagan recused herself from the involvement after taking the consulting job. And here's how Fagan responded today.
I diligently followed all Oregon government ethics published guidelines for private employment for public officials. I look forward to the Ethics Commission because they will confirm that I faithfully followed Oregon's ethics rules and laws. I'm even more eager for the Department of Justice to publish their findings because I know that they will verify that the hardworking auditors in the Oregon Audits Division conducted their work with independence and integrity.
Prior to taking the consulting gig in February, emails indicate that Fagan indeed reached out to a state ethics investigator asking for, quote, clarity of conflicts of interest, end quote. Today, she said she talked with Ethics Commission staff 3 times to make sure that she really understood the ins and outs. State law bars public officials from using their positions for personal gain.
I think the first step to rebuilding trust is to admit when you've broken trust in the first place. And that's what I'm here to do today. To admit when I made a mistake. Those who know me personally know that whether it's as a mom or a partner or a friend, I don't always get it right. But when I don't, I own it, I reflect and learn, and I seek to repair. And that's what I'm going to be doing with Oregonians for the next 2 years.
Republican leaders accused Fagan of committing major ethics violations and called on her to resign, surprising absolutely no one. Obviously, it does not appear that is happening. So why would Fagan even consider taking a side gig when she already had a Secretary of State job? Well, the simple answer is elected officials are people too, with their own lives away from the intense public spotlight.
I'm starting over financially after a divorce. I have 2 young kids. I have student loans and other bills. I'm a renter in the expensive Portland metro area, and I'm the sole income earner in my household. So, to put it bluntly, my Secretary of State salary alone is not enough for me to make ends meet. I am deeply honored to serve as Oregon Secretary of State, regardless of the compensation.
Fagan makes $77,000 a year as Secretary of State. She also teaches part-time at Willamette University. Now, it is a little unusual, but it's certainly not unheard of for a statewide elected official to have a side job. That got us thinking about salaries for elected officials. You know what? They're not as much as you probably think. As we started to do our research, we realized our friends at the Oregonian were a step ahead of us, and we think their article is certainly worth your time. Jamie Goldberg and David Kanzler put this together. The headline sells it a little bit short because they have a table where you can actually see the pay for all of the 49,000 state employees, not just those who make over $100,000. We're going to get a little numbers heavy here, so accountants rejoice, and for everyone else, hang in. We're going to keep it simple. It's going to be interesting, and we're going to have some graphics to help us all understand. It's important to note that we're looking at base pay here. That does not include benefits or anything like that, just the base salary. Here's how the numbers stack up. More than 7,000 state employees receive base pay of at least 6 figures, $100,000 or more. 31 of those make more than $300,000 and 2 make more than $400,000. The highest paid state employee is Rex Kim, the Chief Investment Officer for the State Treasury. He makes more than $500,000 in base pay alone. The other top 10 earning state employees include other investment officials with the Treasury and psychiatrists at the state hospital. Meanwhile, the lowest paid full-time worker was a human service specialist in the Department of Human Services who made under $34,000. That's just over $16 an hour. If you'd like to check the statewide salary database for yourself, head over to the Oregonian's website to find the story. Now, at last check, it is behind a paywall, but listen, if you're into stories like this and if you enjoy watching the story, our show, the journalists over there at the Oregonian, they do a great job, and it's certainly worth the price of a subscription. But let's get back to the salary comparisons for some of Oregon's elected officials. Remember, the base pay for Secretary of State, $77,000. She's the auditor of all public accounts, the chief elections officer, the public records administrator, the chair of the Oregon Sustainability Board, and helps the governor and treasurer supervise and manage state-owned lands. Oh, and by the way, since Oregon does not have a lieutenant governor, if for some reason the governor's office becomes vacant, the Secretary of State is next in line. That's how Kate Brown first became governor. The salaries of the governor, secretary of state, state treasurer, and attorney general are all set by state law that was last updated in 2014. Oregon Code Chapter 292, Section 311, the governor makes $98,600 every year and then gets an additional $1,000 per month for expenses. Secretary of State is there at $77,000 with $250 a month for expenses. State Treasurer Tobias Reed also makes $77,000 a year with an extra $250 a month. And remember, Reed's top investment guy is the one who makes the most in the state, more than $500,000 every year. Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum makes a bit more, $82,200 with $250 a month for expenses. So how do those elected officials' salaries stack up across the country? Really not that good. We got a look at data from something called the Book of States. It's an annual report by the Council of State Governments. That's the nation's largest nonpartisan organization that serves all three branches of state elected and appointed officials. These numbers represent the base pay for elected officials from the latest year available, which is 2021. Here's how Oregon stacks up when it comes to base pay. For the state's CEO, the governor, New York takes the top spot, $225,000. Washington is fifth on the list, with Jay Inslee making just shy of $190,000 a year. Oregon way down towards the bottom, 47th, ahead of only Arizona, Colorado, and Maine. You apparently don't want to govern Maine. They only pay $70,000 a year to run the state. So how about Secretary of State? Well, Tennessee takes the top spot there at more than $200,000 a year. Washington is in the top half of states at $134,000. Oregon ranks 45th. That's ahead only of Wisconsin and Arizona. And you may be thinking, well, you know, that's better than where we got ranked for the governor's pay. Actually, it's not. 3 states do not even have Secretary of States: Alaska, Hawaii, and Utah. So this list is based on 47 states total, not 50. Oregon is 45th out of 47. We don't have a nationwide data for the state treasurer, but we do have the attorney general salaries. First place, New York, $210,000. Washington's Bob Ferguson is in the top 10 at $172,000. Oregon AG Ellen Rosenblum comes in dead last. Sorry, 50th out of 50 for her base salary of just over $82,000 a year. And 49th place is a ways off. Arizona's AG makes $90,000. So what's the takeaway here? Well, it sure doesn't pay to get involved in state politics, at least not at some of these top levels. So you can understand why those folks might be attracted to some side gigs. That's not to say that what Secretary of State Shemia Fagan did with the cannabis company is something that should be swept under the rug. Far from it. But let those lists serve as a little reminder the next time you find yourself thinking the governor or the treasurer rakes in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. The simple answer is no, they don't. They have benefits and things like that that do make the job a bit more comfortable, but it's not exactly a get-rich-quick journey either. All right, what are your thoughts about all this? Do you think some of the state's top elected officials should get a raise to lift us from the basement of the national salary rankings? I sort of do. Or do you think that they're making plenty already? You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. Our number is 503-226-5090. When we return, we'll head out to Cape Kiwanda to unravel the mystery behind this rare occurrence that has experts stumped. How did it happen? Discuss amongst yourselves, and we'll see if your theories align with what we're hearing from those in the know when the story returns.
Straight ahead at 6:30, a man shot by Salem police after they say he was shooting at patrol cars. We have the latest. Plus, an Oregon bill to end sweeps of homeless camps on public property is gaining national attention. Why there's more to the story than some are reporting. And people who depend on public transit in Clatsop County are on their own. Why the Sunset Empire Transportation District abruptly suspended service. Details straight ahead at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
He got in touch with me. He said, "What's happening here?" I said, "Holy moly, that is an incredible landform. We've never seen it before."
And that is saying something when that guy says it. That's Portland State University geology professor emeritus Scott Burns. He thought he'd seen it all until he saw these photos of an extremely rare sand formation on the Oregon coast. Portland resident Pilar French took them recently at Cape Kiwanda near Pacific City and shared them with us. Thanks for sharing. Take a look. It looks like someone dragged a giant rake down the dunes to make these nice straight grooves, but I assure you, this was not done by humans or aliens for that matter, as some have speculated. Professor Burns says the technical term for this rare but naturally occurring feature is linear earth flow. To understand how it happened, we have to go back 5,000 years when the dunes at Cape Kiwanda first began to form. Like rings on a tree, the lines of darker sand tell us the history of the dunes, a repeating cycle of pine trees, fires, and reborn and buried soil blown around and battered by the waves all into a fine sand. Normally, when it rains on parabolic dunes like these, the water seeps through evenly, making nice smooth edges. So what happened here? Professor Burns has a hypothesis.
I think recently we have had a lot of very dry periods before the wintertime. And into the sand, you got a lot of silt, dust blowing. And the dust and the silt is filling in the pores in there, so kind of clogging it. And so instead, what happens is the water goes in and stays. It doesn't go straight through. And then add some weight to the slope and it flows down.
How about that? So there you go. By the way, Professor Burns specializes in geomorphology, say that 3 times fast, or how land gets its shape. He's been at it for nearly half a century, so yeah, we're going to defer to his very educated guess here. He says he's never seen it in a textbook before, so maybe now he needs to write that himself. Pilar went back to the dunes this past weekend to see if our formation was still there after all that rain on the coast, and this is what it looked like. All the deep grooves, they're gone. They're just not there. It looks like they've melted and oozed down into the dune and then rehardened, kind of, leaving all the darker sand at the bottom. Mother Nature never ceases to amaze us here in Oregon, even the experts who look at the stuff all the time.
I showed it to the department. We had a department meeting yesterday. I said, "Look at this." Nobody had seen it either. So very, very special.
Yes, indeed. By the way, remember this mysterious sinkhole that opened up on Cape Kiwanda back in January? We asked Professor Burns, and he said that the sinkhole and the earth flow are completely unrelated, just in case you were wondering. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. But remember, the story, our story, that never ends. Stick around for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.